Let me ask you about testing and validation. How is testing being done as you do your work stage by stage?
Well, testing can be done at lots of different levels, all through the design process. And it really depends on what you're trying to test and how important that information is in terms of informing the design. The key thing to understand is that you're always trying to seek information either from the user or through other methods to sort of validate and inform that design as you cycle through the various iterations of a potential solution. There's lots of different, as I was saying before, there's lots of different points in which you can test a design concept. It can be all the way at the scenario level where you're thinking about the user in a particular context, in a particular story, and you might be taking that scenario back to the user to validate whether or not that's an actual scenario or it represents something that they can identify with. You might be taking your low fidelity prototypes, your sketch-based prototypes, and testing that with the user to see if it achieves some sort of threshold of value. You might be taking workflows that you design and trying to validate those to see if they are operating in the right way or if they solve a very particular problem. You might be taking very high fidelity prototypes to the market to see if product resonates with users, if it's marketable, if it achieves certain marketing standards as well.
Would you do that after the product is already at a working prototype stage, or would you do it before?
Well, ideally you would do a lot of this before, but there might be scenarios in which it's valuable even after the release and launch of a product to continue to test it and to see feedback from users to integrate at lots of different times. So for example, you could even be looking at product reviews on Amazon after you release a product and using that as information to help improve a product. I guess my number one tip is, A, to get those prototypes in front of users as early as possible and as often as you possibly can. Now that early and often is very variable, but there's lots of different ways that you can do that. One way is through very simple paper prototypes and sketches where maybe you're designing a screen on paper in your little notebook or even on Post-it notes, putting that in front of users, asking them questions about it, asking them, like maybe stepping them through a workflow or stepping them through a task and having a simple dialogue that way. You could be doing something where you're taking relatively mid-level fidelity wireframes and you throw that together in a PowerPoint file and you give that to them and you say, you know, what kinds of things would you do to complete task A, B, or C, and have them vocalize their feedback and the actions that they may take while interacting with that particular interface mockup or that prototype. You might be able to use a tool like Sketch or Envision and create a very robust interactive prototype where you give a user a particular task and you ask them to complete that task and you observe their behavior, you observe their performance, etc. There's lots of different ways to do it, all the way from the analog end of the spectrum with sketches all the way to some very interesting digital delivery platforms where you can even do things via the web and serve up prototypes that way. There's a lot of really interesting tools out there that will allow you to do that in very simple and easy ways.
Give us one piece of advice for our learners that they can use in their work as far as UI design.
Well, I would say for all types of design, including interaction design and user interface design, is always to have an open mind, always have the beginner's mind. Don't go into situations thinking that you know everything. Always try to observe, always try to absorb. Many times as a user interface designer, you don't know a lot about the technology that might be driving a system. You may not know a lot about the user. So it's incumbent upon you to have that open mind, to really absorb the information and really try to see what's happening and not make any assumptions about what the user is trying to do. Really observe and be open-minded and understand that there's probably more going on than what you can see at the top level.